I find it very valuable to use the Castaneda distinction of personalities in three basic groups. That's been very helpful to me in my own considerations and to some extent in my conversations with other people. Because the problem with people is, and I had this conversation with my tattoo artist yesterday, and yesterday I had it was the head of the studio who did it, or the owner of the studio, because the guy that was doing it previously has unfortunately left to be nearer his home. And he was also far more economical because this fellow charged me quite handsomely for this latest tattoo on my arm. I think it's quite nice. I'm quite pleased with it. But I guess it's the biggest one that I've had yet. But it was really a bit expensive for me, so I'll probably change the studio now. And yeah, he's a skilled tattooist. There's no question of it. And I was chatting to him. Well, of course, I have. It takes about three hours. I think it took 3 hours altogether. 4 hours actually. And he we had an interesting conversation, I thought, and he was basically explaining that he was a nice person all the time. He was emphasizing the fact that he was accepting of others, and he was producing a lot of homilies as to his friendliness and openness towards other people. And he would never argue with other people, but he'd said that he would just keep distance when he's unable to form any kind of a relationship or that any kind of problem might emerge because he doesn't wish to enter into any kind of discussion. And that he has his experience of his life was that it was perfectly affable, and all of his relationships with his parents and his siblings had always been totally friendly and open. Um, and I mean, if we know anything about families, I've got to be a little bit skeptical of that description. But maybe there are families that function better than others. I mean, not all families are sort of psychotic or tormented, but people are, often tormented, aren't they? There was one particular, his brother's wife was the sticking point. He didn't like, she wasn't liked, or she was very aggressive and rude, and she had the two had a child, I think, who was a boy who used to bully the other children, so they didn't like him to come to their meetings together, and that he'd married this woman and he was too much under her influence. Those things happen in families, I understand that. But as he spoke, I realized he was just telling me what a nice guy he was all the time. And of course, he owns a tattoo parlor, and a guy came in to have a satanic tattoo on the back of his calf, and just to see if it would be a possibility and what the guy thought. And they arranged to meet up. Yeah, he'll do it. He'll tattoo anything. He doesn't follow the Bible. He doesn't care. I said I would be very reluctant to have a horned devil tattooed on my body. But he said, "Oh, it's just picture. Doesn't matter. You know, people believe all sorts of different things." He said, "Me, I'm just easygoing. I just get along with everybody." And of course he's got a professional interest in being that person, because everybody's a potential client. And I was moved then to relate the Castaneda classification, and as I say, I find it helpful. And I explained that according to the sorcerers, there are only three basic types of people. I said it also to Lloyd and Debbie, that there are mean and nasty and petty people. There are self-important, puffed up people who have a very high opinion of themselves that not really warranted. And there are dependent people who can't function independently but otherwise are very nice and are generally very affable and the most agreeable people you could hope to deal with. That breaks it down a bit, doesn't it? You see, because people get trapped in their personality, and when you're trapped in your personality, you can't reach through to the divine, which is where you want to go, basically. It's just conceit. You see, our personality is just our opinion, as it were, of ourselves. We create it as a defense mechanism, I suppose, to some extent, when we're very, very young. And it just defaults into these just very basic types of people. So when you identify what group you belong to, and I've identified myself as being the prating fool, as it were, the full of myself. I think I'm fit more into that group than the mean and nasty group. I've got some meanness about me, don't get me wrong, but I'm not really, I don't do nasty hardly at all. It upsets me, that sort of stuff. Petty, possibly, but mainly I think I'm just just vanity and puffed up is and daydreams, pipe dreams. That's me, insubstantial. And I thought that Lloyd was mean and nasty, and I suspected, I didn't know, that also the tattoo art parlor owner was mean and nasty in his basic personality. But given his penchant for conversation, actually, it's probably more likely, isn't it, that he was on my spectrum, personality-wise, quite the actor, I suppose. And I saw that he was putting this act on because I was sitting there for so long, you see. So I wanted to break through and see if I could connect on a deeper level because I was just his audience, I suppose, really. And that's fine, but after a while it's dull. I want to have some communication happening rather than just preening like peacocks. How clever and important we both were, because clearly I am. And he believes that he is, and perhaps he is. So when I outlined the three basic personality types and asked him which one he was going to choose, he took a phone call and said, "Oh, I need to take this," and then spent almost the entire rest of the session, which was about an hour and a half, on the phone with speaking Romanian to people, that just chatting to them rather than to me. I think it was unconsciously offensive. I don't think he was deliberately trying to be nasty to me. It would be against his interest. I mean, he hadn't even given me the price yet. I didn't have a quotation for that job. I didn't ask for one. I trusted so far I'd paid what seemed to me to be a fair price, because the other tattooist charges about one third the price that this gentleman applied, as far as I can see. Maybe a little bit less, a little bit more, but it did seem far more economical. No, I don't think he was trying to offend me, but obviously the conversation was just, maybe it touched some nerve or something, you see, because people who think that they're nice, they really can't take the idea that they're horrible. But very often they are. Um, in or false, shall we say, if he's like me. But once you understand that you're false, then you can control it and deal with it, and also change it. You can. It's just a tool. You understand then, what the. It's hard to explain. You can use your falseness, or you can be genuine. You can choose. You understand that you are acting. You see, your personality is ultimately, it's just an act. And the same for people who are dependent. Many people who will have a dependent personality, and it's not really been identified. I believe that Debbie has a dependent personality, because she's constantly getting involved with groups and with the health service in particular. Her health is not good, and so she has constant interactions with the NHS and with specialists, and is complaining about them and all the rest of it. But it's giving her contact with others, you see. I suspect because she's a very affable person and always very kind and friendly, unlike Lloyd and I. Lloyd's definitely mean and nasty. He even admitted it himself, so and he recognised that I was the other one too. I've known Lloyd for quite a while. He picked up the idea quite well. You see, because it's biblical. Because the Bible says there's none of us any good, actually. So even the dependent person, then, you see, once they've identified that personality flaw that they have, then they can overcome it. They know what they will always default to it, and they can also engineer their life that they don't need to be independent, except in certain moments, and then they will be able to use that faculty. Because you've learned something of the craft of acting, I suppose, because ultimately we're all actors. So there I had to listen to just unintelligible Romanian conversation with long pauses for the rest of almost the entire rest of the session. It's odd the way that things go, isn't it? But that is quite a useful technique. And with Debbie, because she has health problems, of course, I had to recommend, I recommend it to everybody, that they try the carnivore diet. Debbie's very overweight. She has very, very poor eyesight indeed. And her diet is just abysmal. Whenever we go out, she's a vegetarian, but she doesn't like much food. She kind of she likes baked potatoes with butter. She eats a vegetarian burger without salad. What else does she have? She's very, very limited in the things that she will allow, and she has no meat. I'm not sure about dairy. And I just said, look, if you were to start eating meat, which I believe is a biblical, has been given to you by the Bible, and persist with a carnivore diet, I think your health would begin to improve immeasurably. She's very overweight, and dealing with that would be such a blessing. It might improve her eyesight a little bit also. And of course, she's going towards diabetes because of her weight. So she doesn't have long to live in her current position. But she had an emotional connection to the idea of being a vegetarian, and she took umbrage actually that I would even, the fact that I'd recommended it. And she said, I will never ever in my life eat an animal after I witnessed a scene at the abattoir of the slaughter of sheep or something, and it had traumatized her. But that's trauma. Because of this misunderstanding of the nature of animals and the anthropomorphism that has been promoted through Hollywood, you see, that trauma becomes even more real for her, and it might cost her her life. And she's in error, in absolute error in her placement of affection. It's disappointing to me to know that she won't follow that advice. But I even really, although she's a Christian and as Lloyd is a Christian, she goes to church. But I think that probably is again more the social aspect than anything else. She doesn't show a great interest in the Bible. She doesn't seem to know exactly what's in it. So I suppose she hasn't read it. I don't think Lloyd has read it either, but he listens to a lot of the religious podcasts and things like that on the radio. I don't know whether he listens to somebody reading the Bible sometimes or not. I have recommended it to him, but it's quite difficult for me to interact with his blind person's interface on the computer, and I found it quite hard previously to put him in touch with that sort of stuff. He was able to listen to YouTube videos at one point, but people have got to listen to what they want to. But he could listen to the whole Bible. It's been recorded many times, hasn't it, on YouTube? And so could Debbie. Debbie can't really read. She can see enough that she can read like one letter at a time with a lens, and it takes her forever. It took her a long time. She read the words on my arm when it says "peace on earth," and but it did take her quite a long time to read it. But she's trapped in this, personality thing, and so if she could only, if I'm right in thinking that she has this personality, if she could escape from that trap. But it's subtle. Perhaps she won't. Perhaps not everybody can escape, because we're all trapped to some measure, you see, by our personality. And we just have to get over ourselves, because otherwise you can't, how should we say, you can't really humble yourself before the Lord. I think that's the problem. Even a dependent person would find it hard, because you're dependent on somebody else. God bless.